Okay, so we should be good to go. Can everybody see that? Jolly good? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that working? Great stuff. So yeah, just a quick introduction to the UWI for those who are not too familiar with it. Our organization is really about helping people to think about better work and better workplaces and how the workforce is changing in the future. You can reach it on the uwi.com. This is a sponsored session, so we're really talking about inverting the hiring pyramid today. But if you want to connect onto the network, you can become a fellow of the UWI, like many of the people on the panel today, and join over 150 experts in the industry that are talking about where the direction of the industry is going, and also covering topics of total talent management that cut across contingent and full-time employment. So, you know, one of the things that we are looking to do is have a more cohesive conversation from both sides of the talent industry. So with me today, I'd like to welcome the panel. First of all, I've got Deepika Devaraj. I'm just going to quickly, guys and girls, just introduce you, if I may, just for expedient purposes. So Deepika is my sort of talent technology guru on the panel. Deepika has got a background in IT outsourcing and IT solutions, and she's been very much involved in the IT sourcing arena. Deepika's based in North America, but is also working for a global business. And Deepika is part of the US Tech Solutions organization that came up with this term of inverting the hiring pyramid that we're going to be discussing today. I've got the most interesting surname in talent industry, Colin Yashioka Smith, with me today. Colin, as he explained to me when we first met, has had a boring name and made it interesting by getting married. So Colin, thanks for that small change. Kalpesh Baxi, if people don't know Kalpesh in the UK talent industry, where have you been? Kalpesh is when we talk about movers and shakers in the industry, well, he is the mover and shaker in the industry. So if you have to reach out to anybody in the staffing industry in the UK, he's the first place to go normally. And if you're speaking to somebody else, and I'd always ask him first if it's worth the conversation. And I'm with Chris Radvansky as well today. Hello, Chris. Chris, could you hear me?
Hello, sorry about that. Hello there, Ian.
Okay. Yeah, so Chris Radvansky is my talent data expert, and it's not just about the fact he knows an awful lot about data, he also knows a lot about talent as well. So Chris cuts across both of these subjects and is very much involved in helping talent leaders, MSPs, staffing organizations to harness their data. So for the panel, I've also got Jake with me as well. Jake's part of my team. Jake is helping me to coordinate this. He's already fixed the chat bot, the chat conversation issue. So I'm hoping Jake's going to solve many other technical problems as we go through the next hour. And Jake works with me on the editorial on the magazines that we produce for the UWI. So for the panel, have I misdescribed anybody? No, is that all good?
All good.
Okay, good. Because we want to move quickly on. So we've got a lot to talk about today. And the subject that we're going to be talking about, of course, is how is the industry changing in the way that we're moving to curated talent pools, direct sourcing. So we'll talk about that kind of definition in a minute. But the way we're going to play this out is a quick 5-minute introduction. We're then going to jump into a 40-minute panel discussion, and then we'll lead very quickly into a quick fire Q&A, wrap up and takeaway. And just to make this slightly interesting, we've got a few kind of quizzes going on for the guys on the panel as well. We'll be asking them a few questions around the table on some of the stuff we've prepared earlier. So looking forward to that. So let's just quickly run into a definition. When we talk about inverting the hiring pyramid, what are we actually talking about? Well, it's the transition that's happening in the industry with employer brands looking to go direct to their candidate audience and to find and attract the talent that they need before they need it, instead of waiting, as the industry typically works today, for a purchase requisition to be raised, demanded by a hiring manager. And then as soon as that purchase requisition is raised, everything happens and we all start magically looking for the talent that we need. So what we're seeing is this transition happening. I think more to the point, when we've been to the conferences this year, I think a lot of us have picked up on the conversations around curated talent pools, around hiring, around the challenges in finding top talent, in the recognition that there are some very significant segments of skill set missing at the moment or in very short supply, and how does the industry right size itself, and what is the role of all of the stakeholders and players when this change is happening, as it's happening. And I'm going to run straight quickly to Colin on that definition, because Colin, you've got an awful lot of experience in the industry around total talent management. Does this definition make sense to you, or do you think it's still already off? Oh, I think you're on mute, Colin. Sorry.
Let's try that again, take two. I think the definition makes a lot of sense. And without going way into a topic that we could be here for quite a long time talking about, I definitely think you have to look at what your business wants, your talent, and then flip that around to work out where that would fit when you need it effectively. So yeah, I would totally agree with that.
And what we're going to be talking about, of course, is also employer brand value through this call and the implications on that. So for those of you, actually, I'm just going to another question. Sorry, I'm going to jump to Kalpesh for a second. And Kalpesh, something played on my mind this morning. I couldn't let it go. And that was the fact that the industry has been talking about direct sourcing, I think, for quite a number of years now. My instinct was that actually maybe that's the wrong focus, and maybe we should be talking about employer brand value rather than the instrument of direct sourcing as a technology platform. So Kalpesh, could you just jump in on that and just give me your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's the right way of looking at it. And you and I, we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about, we talked about ambulance chasers, the staffing industry, etc. But I think more and more we've now got to realise, and I think when the corporates I get to talk to, they're realising that your employee is actually your customer, right? Yeah. So you have to give them an experience. So if you don't have employee brand clean, if your proposition doesn't make sense, direct sourcing also almost becomes redundant. And actually, if we think about cause and effect, the reason why companies have to keep rehiring to some extent, apart from bad hiring practices and everything else that goes on, is the fact they're not very clear on their proposition. So when people turn up, there's a misalignment of what they expect to get and what they do get.
Yeah. Interesting. And also for the audience, if you're not familiar with this term and you're not familiar with that definition of that term, and you've got some thoughts on it, do please add your questions and comments as we're going along in the chat. I know Jake will be keeping a close eye on that, and we will be coming back to those questions later. So be sure to ask the front of mind questions as you're going through them. So if we look at charting the shift from transactional employment, I'm going to ask Kalpesh to talk to me about that in a minute, but also the employer brand engagement approach that's hiring. Let's look at some of the stats that are hitting the industry at the moment, just to tease ourselves with what's happening in 2024. Organizations prioritizing employer brands see an average of 33% lower cost per hire, says Deloitte. McKinsey thinks 70% of active job seekers prioritize a company's reputation and values. Gartner's saying 65% of candidates will drop out of the hiring process if they perceive a misalignment between their values and those of their employer or prospective employer. Accenture suggests that companies leveraging a proactive employer branding strategy see a 50% increase in the employee engagement. And LinkedIn are suggesting that 75% of job seekers research a company before applying. Chris, any thoughts on any of those as we're looking through them?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that sticks out to me is the alignment right in the middle with Gartner. There is definitely oftentimes a misalignment between a company's goals and an individual's goals. So folks that are in this kind of competition for talent, when those candidates have the desired skill set, the needed skill set that's in the market, they are then in more of a power position to determine, where do I want to go? I want to work for a company that is aligned with my values, that I appreciate the mission, that it's not strictly looking for profit and maximizing profit for shareholders, but it's something that I feel passionate about. So in that way, that's something that's a little bit difficult to capture from a data perspective. And that's, of course, my interest here. But that's where so much is about data, but it's also very much about relationships and understanding where people's interests really lie.
Yeah. Let me just quickly move on then. So let's go to I just want to say to the audience here, one of the big questions, of course, we're looking at is, what needs to change to invert the hiring pyramid from where we are today. So what we're going to be looking at as part of this is, okay, where's the net present state? Where are we today? But also, what does that transition look like? How do you get from A to B? So we'll be coming through that question as we're going through this. For the audience, just to help us to understand the sort of people that we are talking to, are you a talent supplier, a provisioner, partner, or hunter, or something else? So if you want to just jump in the chat and just say, I'm a supplier, or I'm a hunter, or I'm something else, just say other, or you can even tell us what it is, then that will help us when we get to the conversation about your questions to fill in the gaps. So I'm going to jump back to Kalpesh on the drivers and the resistors. You know, I was looking at this from a kind of a plus, you know, the pull and the push, Kalpesh, of this topic. And I was thinking, well, if you chat on a chat bot, as we all do nowadays, it will say, well, the top 5 things you need to think about are you're going to get lower hiring costs, more talent choice, greater engagement and retention. You're going to get more self-determination, a more adaptive workforce. So, hey, why would you not? But then on the negative of this, we're hearing that the resistors to change are, is the transition really worth it? Is our employer brand attractive? Does it work? I mean, does this actually work? Have we seen it working, or do we just wait? Can we resource it? And do we have the bandwidth to actually consider yet another initiative that could potentially go nowhere? So Kalpesh, what are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, my starting point is, and I think when we did the meeting a couple of weeks ago, and when we went through the precursor to this session, there's a reality, right? In the world today, AI is coming. You know, it's not, in fact, let me rephrase that. AI is here, but it will get more evolved. And I think the challenge organizations have today is that we're in a very interesting economic scenario where, you know, some economies are flatlining, some economies are going backwards, companies are under pressure to keep hitting their bottom lines. So if I think about the negatives in terms of your column there, Ian, is like, is a transition worth it? Well, of course it will be for the long term, because if you can forward plan your talent requirements and start talent pooling or building your talent networks, then you should have more people ready to go. You should be able to onboard them, and it should work really well.
Yeah.
The challenge we have today is companies don't have that time or patience to be able to do that, because to implement a new HR tech stack with AI to start talent pooling for 2, 3, 4 years down the line has a time cost, a financial cost, and an opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is, I need to fill these jobs today. Who's going to do that then? The time cost is, if I'm doing this future project, how do we deal with some of the other challenges around employee engagement, employee brand proposition, overall retention? So, you know, part of this is most companies seem to focus on hiring. They don't spend enough time on retention. And then the final part is, does the C-suite really understand what's required? So there was a really interesting, I know it was on the list before, but I read a report just yesterday from Boston Consulting Group about their 5 recommendations on how companies need to adopt AI. One of the biggest reasons why AI or automation or future-proofing around opportunities is the C-suite's not engaged. They don't know what jobs won't exist. They don't know what jobs need to become online in the future. So drivers and resistors, down to money, down to time, down to opportunity cost.
Got it. And Deepika, this is a technology-driven activity, isn't it? I mean, we're seeing a lot of technology in this. You know, what is the role of the technology, please, in this space?
So Ian, just to start, you know, in the language and not to scare the audience with all the jargons of technology, and also coming from the core team who invented the very concept of inverting the hiring pyramid, I just wanted to spend a minute explaining what we're trying to achieve it here. It's more in the lines of a very cultural shift from reactive to a proactive approach. You moving towards a quality-driven, search than the quantity. So it is all about the leveraging and exploring the technologies for the righteous aspects of it, and making it very relationship driven. In all the means, it is just definitely going to help the stakeholders, be it the candidates, be it the MSPs or suppliers, and also the very businesses. By adopting technology, we are definitely talking about an inclusive environment of having people process in-house or inbuilt. In that means it is very taken care, an environment to have a pre-engaged, pre-vetted, and pre-qualified setup for oneself. It is definitely going to make the life easy from drivers and resistors. I would say the technology is making to make things easier for direct candidates, having them a very transparent environment, having them a very engaging and not left out kind of a space. To top it up from business perspective, it is very, very data driven, with all of us are after. Like, they will be having the stats at fingertip. It's not today's requirement, but having it very future ready an environment for the business. However, from MSPs and staffing agencies, I would say the concept is very picking up. There are already adoption happening. In the very short term or an immediate short term, there will be a prevailing resistance or reluctance, but adopting it is very essential, going to be a biggest game changer. They can leverage their in-house existing database, top it up with a bit of technology, have a curated, tailor-made, segmentized candidate pool to make it meaningful and approach. So I would see with technology-driven, talented, curated talent pool, it's going to be a collaborative and beneficial model for all of the stakeholders around, driving it big time.
So part of that is, I guess, is the fact that AI, we always think about AI and kind of generating stuff and helping productivity. But I guess from what you're saying there, it's also about providing more possibilities for personalization. So
absolutely. So AI is end to end. We can go by the in-depth of process, right from the candidate to search the job. Let's say the hiring manager is all about the demands. He raises the PR, as you were rightly narrating. And then it takes some time to reach to the middle layer, which is the staffing or the MSP team, to work on it. So there is a lot of time that is consumed. By having a curated pool, AI will do maximum job by itself. Like, there is an existing database. It'll be doing the skill matching. It will be doing a scorecarding. It will be helping you identify who is immediately available in the market, who is ready to relocate, who is going to be available in your rate card. So all at the fingertip, just for you to quickly analyze and opt for. Even from the candidate perspective, it's very experiential. While we talk technology, it is all living with us. They will be having a real-time movement of the process. They will be having an engagement, updates, and everything day in, day out. Yeah, it's a very techno-driven environment, but making it very experiential, I would say.
Okay. So let's go through to what does it mean to these different stakeholders? Because Colin, I'd like to come back to the humanity of the staffing process, because I think ultimately a lot of people moved into the HR and talent industry because they're people, right? They like to communicate. Do you think there's going to be a pushback here around authenticity with AI in the short term, where ultimately people will want to talk to a real human recruiter, somebody they could talk to?
I don't think AI will ever replace that human contact, right? And openly, I would reflect very honestly that I would say we're probably more in the generation of, rather than real AI, it's probably automation at this point in time, and there'll be a generation where it's real AI starts kicking in. There might be elements or small bits of ChatGPT, but it won't be quite like talking to someone and it being really machine learning to its full demise. But where I do see a trend of AI being the most useful actually is in learning and development, or L&D and things like that, where you can get, rather than typical e-learning, it's more a tailored experience to someone. I think actually that would be where it would be really good. But I think there's always going to be that, and talking from a typical HR person here, there's always going to be that bespoke relationship challenge that's in a business. You're never going to replace that. No bit of tech will.
But I think also, with the tech, Colin, And I'm sure if I speak to Thipika, she's going to tell me that, you know, if you don't want to use some of these features, you don't have to use them. You can switch them off. But I do know, I spoke to one company the other day, and they were basically saying, we don't want AI curating the CVs and the covering letters. We want the human in that. Is there a risk that AI is just actually going to get in the way of all of this?
Oh, absolutely. Well, even with social media, if I take it out of context, I mean, LinkedIn already got a feed trying to highlight whether some post has been written by AI or not. So you're going to have that in the hiring process. It's going to be a question mark. Absolutely. We're going to have that challenge, no doubt.
Yeah.
But I do think with every negative, there's probably two positives with AI. Is the reality of it as well. So.
Yeah. And Chris, let me just come to you for a second I'm just thinking about this ratio, because Thipika's just made this point about the massive impact of technology and its contribution to this. But if I look at the need to make data-driven decisions and the role of data here to drive everything, to drive how the communication is happening, to keep the candidates interested in a talent window, understanding whether it's all working or not. What's the ratio of this if we talk about inverting the hiring pyramid, how much of this is change management? How much of it is data? How much of it is like the tech platform? And how much of it is something else? How do you see that that bigger blend?
Well, I think that with any business process, you got to think about it like a body with multiple different systems. Your digestive system, your circulatory system. You got all the different systems that I'm not thinking of right now, and you got to say, well, which one's the most important? If any of those systems shuts off, that person's not in good shape, right? So
Yeah.
all of these things need to exist at the same time and in optimal manners. So I think that for me, when you talk about change management, that is a lot of, well, folks don't want to get away from the things that they're really good at today. And
Yeah.
therefore, if we're going to go ahead and invert this hiring pyramid, then we need to change the way that we've historically found some level of success. It might not be perfect, but there's some level of success there, and that's why we've established that process. To change that is then to establish brand new structured processes, brand new ways of capturing data, brand new ways of using that data. And
Yeah.
that's what makes people uncomfortable. So I understand that there is a return on investment here in making these changes. Any change is made with perfect intention, I would say. It's just a matter of how is it, played out? How is it actually implemented?
Yeah. Go on, Colin.
Just to echo that point there, Chris, but also some of the stuff we talked about in the last slide. Yes, it's got lots of arms and legs. There's a couple of arms and legs that are part of Total Talent, and I don't go into Total Talent too much because there's a bit of a hot potato on it. But where it does really make a huge difference, and the inverted pyramid really helps in this, is one I talked about actually when we did the podcast before that, this session, which was around diversity of hiring, right? Understand if you open up the talent pool and look at all the different types of people that you can have, actually opens up you to be able to hire someone from a talent pool you would not normally hire from, because you're giving yourself more time to widen that search up. And I think that's one that I think every business would love to do. I think it's a very rewarding process to do that. So this model definitely will help with that. The other one with Total Talent, and where Total Talent truly is I'll give you an example from a tech perspective. If you've got a project you're trying to do in your business, everyone sees things in a hiring way from a very recruitment perspective, but actually is that a business you're bringing in to do that? Is that someone on an SOW? Is that someone from a recruitment business? Is that someone you're 2Ping from another department? Is it a combination of those things, clearly done compliantly? But it could be a number of those, and that could be the best for that project. Actually, you're opening up the talent to more diverse ways of engaging with people, and that truly is Total Talent. It's looking at what is that end project you're trying to do. So this actually plays into wider than just sourcing people and talent in that sense.
Thipika, I see your hands up. So did you have a comment to make on that?
I think both of them have covered it. Actually, was trying to top it up, Colin, and Chris got it covered. So it is pretty much on the lines of Ian, change management to technology to people and process, right? I think it is very essential to complement Colin's point right in the first, over automation, right? We all kind of take it for granted.
Yeah.
Automation is definitely good, but we always fail to remember and make it pretty cold, straight, and impersonal. That's
Yeah.
where it get lost, or the actual essence is not met. And probably we are in the evolution phase where automation is getting better and better and more better with AI, Gen AI, and multiple things around us. So it's about the right balance of technology, come human touch point. I
Yeah.
think that's the magic wand here.
I'm going to talk about balance in a minute back with Colin on a different slide, but Kalpesh, just to come back to this slide, if I may, and thanks for all the comments on that. I'm just wondering, with all of these stakeholders involved in this, who are the stakeholders that are, you think, wanting this, and who are the people that are kind of resisting it based on their, I guess when a business model changes like it does in this situation, there are always winners and losers, aren't there?
I think, look, absolutely. And if I take it out of the context of the organisation stakeholders for a minute, and let's think about the supply chain. And if you think about just picking out a number of different layers of the supply chain, you have direct staff, you have your staffing agencies, you have your VMS and RPO shops and MSP shops, you have your in-house recruitment or your SOW consultancies, and then you have the in-house hiring teams, then you have the hiring manager. If you just think of it as a stack.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would disagree that actually inverting the hiring pyramid is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Right? I think everyone, wherever you go, the difference will be the pressure different people face at different points. So I think, if you're internal with an organization, is my job safe? What am I going to do? If this comes in and we're going to start talent pooling, then if I'm an internal TA person, what happens to my job? If we take it down to the next level of, or take it up to the board, the exec board in an organization of a big enterprise, that exec board have a multiple layer of objectives that they've got to achieve. Primarily is to keep the business alive and keep the business profitable, deliver shareholder value, because there's always a shareholder somewhere. And then sort of further down is about, what do I do to make sure my business is still around tomorrow, the day after, the day after? And the analogy I'd use is, if we think about BlackBerry, just as a really simple one, BlackBerry probably would have thought about inverting the hiring pyramid. They needed lots of developers all the way back, you go back 10, 15 years ago, but their business model just wasn't evolved enough. So even though they were forward thinking about how do I get talent, they were backward in terms of how does my business move forward. So I think going back to your original point, who does this affect? Well, it's HR, it's finance, it's procurement, and it's the operating leaders in an organization. Who actually ultimately decides what happens? In theory, and you and I have talked about this a few times here, and Colin, I'm sure has got an opinion. In theory, the CHRO, the chief people officer, should be the person that dictates the strategy of what happens and how around people. But the reality is, more often than not, they don't hold the purse strings to the finances. That's the CFO.
Yeah. Colin?
Sorry, I was itching to make a comment to that. You're, Kalpesh, one of the few people that, and I would totally agree, where HR should be. Sadly, they're not. And I talk very honestly about this. So if you go back to a CIPD, I did one, I've got the badge. It's great that they teach HR and how to look after their people, and they do a fantastic job and take a lot of, I can't swear on a podcast or an event, but rubbish, let's put it that way, from a business, right? In terms of being that agony aunt, if you like, to a business. But what they're not equipped to do is to understand business. They're not trained in business. And so there's a desire and a want from the C-suite to get them there. There's a desire from the people function to be there, but there's a skills gap that's quite large still. In people. And the only reason I would say I'm different is I run a business and I happen to be trained in HR, right? That is what gets me to that point and dealing with the C-suite, but most HR don't, and that does need to change openly.
Yeah, let's move on to the next question, because I'm going to struggle otherwise to get through all of these. But the question of, is it happening? Thipika already picked up on that, and Thipika, I'm going to come back to you in a second on your experiences on this so far. But Chris, I would probably take the view that in any transitional change in business, the starting point is always about understanding your baseline before you change, because there's no point doing a change and then realizing there's no metrics to measure whether you've done better or not. So What is the jump off point here? Do you think people are in a position to make a decision on this based on the data they have?
I think there's a lot of education that still stands to happen when it comes to direct sourcing. Even within the contingent labor industry, there's been a lot of talk about it for probably the last 6+ years around direct sourcing and talent pooling and things of that nature. But I think it's been lagging until the technology is here. And I really do believe that the investment in technology is at an appropriate level for this to really start taking. So I think that is one of the linchpins here. But ultimately, we need to make sure that people understand, listen, if we are going to change, then we need to make sure why why are we changing? What do we want to achieve? Yes, we are here at A, we want to get to Z, and that will have a benefit of Y, right? We need to really dictate what is the cost benefit analysis, and all that information should be quantifiable. And if it's not quantifiable, at least written down and documented in some way that can be analyzed, okay, to justify all the change that will happen over a 18-month period to say, all right, we started there and I'm so proud of where we are, not only for the cost savings for the efficiencies, but also it's aligned with our missions and with our people, and it's improving their lives as well.
Yeah. And it's just extending on from that, Chris. Do people have this data at the moment, or they just can't bring it together? Or, what's been your experience in terms of, getting this kind of holistic understanding of the state of play?
It's column A and column B. There's certain cultures that are very intentional in saying, listen, we are going to be a data, not focused, but aware organization. If you're data focused and you're almost only considering the data all the time, you do want to understand the human element, the empathy that is necessary. We're talking about HR folks and saying, hey, we need to make sure they understand the business as a whole. And so many times people say within HR, say, wait a second, we can't do that because X, Y, and Z. Okay, you don't want to be the person that says no, you want to be the person that explains how. So if we're going to initially think about no, we say, well, no, but if we do this and this and this and this, then we can actually achieve that goal. So, I think a data culture is very, very important, but you got to consider all the humanity as well.
Yeah, understood. Now, Deepika, going back to this adoption issue, can I ask you the question? What have you seen so far? Because I guess what I've seen at the moment is rather than some sort of grand strategy or agenda around this, I think a lot of companies are really bringing this in the back door and just actually adding it as another option into their VMS as a kind of way of short circuiting the staffing agencies. What are you seeing?
Absolutely, Ian. Coming from the direct environment, I could definitely see the adoption happening. My very own take is more than looking at a technology adoption, we should see or treat technology as an enabler here. We're trying to fix the problem statement or trying to provide the solution, which will go for a long way. I would say it's more towards how technology is going to help here, or expected to help here, is with enhanced candidate experience, employer experience, reduce time to hire, cut down the layers, making it less chaotic or more efficient. So if you ask me why it is happening, we all know, we have been there, part and parcel of the suffering, and we're all fixing it one for all. Yes, there are apprehensions. I'm sure technology will take its own sweet time. You have to train your own bot. It's your very personal assistant. You like it or not, we are all going to treat it as a companion. If you treat it as a competitor, I think, it's going to change it for sure. So all of this put together, to answer your question, especially coming from an environment of workforce strategic solution provider, I would say my direct clients are definitely towards it. They are welcoming the very concept. It's going to make them independent, but at the same time, how I am wearing the hat, be it a technology come workforce strategist, is for sure an advisor. Right? I'm not left out here. I'm not scared of the change. I know there is a traditional approach. There is interventions through technology that is coming up, but I'm enabling my own very customer, being that strategic advisor for them to set up this very process. It's not that easy. While we all of us want to put this one word of AI or technology inside, there involves a lot many aspects to it. You need to integrate your existing landscape. You need to understand your process, make it future ready. Change management, very, very important. I think Kalpesh has touched on it. You need to have your very internal stakeholders accept it, adopt it, data to Chris' point. I think quality of data matters the most here. We all have data. I mean, from business perspective or client perspective, it has to be rich. It has to be up to date to make it relevant. So I think there are multiple puzzles to it. All has to be connected to work in a very seamless pattern. If that answers.
Yeah, it does. Kalpesh, on this conversation about adoption, if you're a staffing agency or an MSP today, do you need to have a kind of a conversation line on this, even if you're not doing it at the moment? You think do you not need to basically say, this is what we're thinking about on this topic?
I think it's already happening, actually, and the good ones are already being proactive around this. And if I think particularly around the MSPs, and if I just think whether the UK or USA, think about the global top 10, agnostic of sector, they're all having to reinvent their business models. They're all having to show more ROI. They're all having to decide what contracts they agree to. They're all having to think about the service propositions to actually defend their margins. So I think those conversations are happening. The challenge at the moment is we're in that awkward period where demand is lower than it has been for the last couple of years. Companies are a little bit uncertain of, okay, well, am I going to need 1,000 of these, 100 of these, 5,000 of these, etc. So I think the solution will depend on the industry sector, the maturity of the organization that have been recruited for. I'm talking to some Series B companies at the moment that, the VPs of HR in there are doing some incredible stuff. It's automation, they've got AI, but they're really clear about the fact that actually this much we'll use humans for, this much we're going to use talent pools for, and there's some pretty cool, amazing products out there that build talent marketplaces around the particular skills that they're looking for. But from an integrated perspective, they know that the days of, if we go back 10 years ago, it was like, let me just phone 10 staffing agencies, we'll get them all running really, really hard and we'll fill these jobs. People are now understanding actually from taking the cost out of it, there is a different way of being optimal in terms of finding the talent.
Okay. So on that point though, so you've had some experiences of companies starting to get involved in this kind of talent curation activity, haven't you? Do you want to just run around that a bit more?
Yeah, so if we use, and it's a very UK-centric example, right? But there's an organisation I'm dealing with at the moment. There's two ends. There's a corporate that has realised actually that, and Ian, I met them at an UWI event, right?
Right.
But the organisation was like, okay, we know this is how we've always recruited, but we're fishing in the same pool. We keep hiring the same individuals. And ironically, we have the same challenges in terms of churn and retention. So what they've now realised is keep fishing over here, but also let's bolt on 3 or 4 different talent pools that we would not normally fish from to try and bring talent in. So they might have the right skills, they might need some training, there might be some reskilling, upskilling required, but there's a different workforce we can tap into. Then the next level down, if I give you sort of 3 particular examples, one is an organisation that's working with ex-military staff to tap into the skills coming out, and actually they're doing stuff in the USA and in the UK. In the USA, veterans have a different premium, unfortunately, to what people coming out of the army do in the UK. But they're building a network of talent professionals. How do they get them ready for Civvy Street? How do they give them skills? Now, right now, no one's saying, oh, we really need these people. But in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, when the green energy industry and all these other industries wake up properly, people with project management skills, dealing with ambiguity, dealing under pressure are going to be really valuable. The other one is actually, it's a UK-centric one where an individual, the founder, has curated a network of over 20,000 female software engineers. Now, the argument could be, well, why is that important? Well, we seem to have a shortage of software engineers when you go onto the job boards and go down the traditional channels. Well, here's another channel where these individuals don't actually look for jobs on job boards. but they might actually be open to changing roles if the right one was put in front of them in the right manner. So I think this is where we've just got to be a little bit different about that inverted pyramid. And I completely agree with Deepika in terms of the talent, its technology comes into it. I am still firmly of the belief that an internal TA function in the company should be focused on the things that they need to do to keep that organization BAU, and the long game stuff should be outsourced to someone externally.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to move on to this next question, which is we've got to the true or false stage. So boys and girls on the panel, here's a series of statements that may be true or may be false according to artificial intelligence. Have a quick read of those, if you will, and just I'm going to start with you, Chris, and just pick one out and just tell me why you think it's true or false.
All right, let's see here. Curated talent pools anticipate future workforce needs. I would say that is not necessarily true. And the reason is that you're kind of looking, if you're just looking at the talent pool, you're looking at all the individuals that are maybe aware of your brand that have shown some level of interest in working with you. Now, that's looking externally. The future workforce needs is looking internally, right? You're considering who do you have on right now as an FTE? What software do you have that can automate all these things? So you might have all the skill sets that you need and all the technology that you need, therefore you might not need those external individuals. So that's one thing I would say, not necessarily, but you break it down and it's going to be true for certain aspects and not true for others.
Jolly good. Deepika, have you picked one out?
Yeah, I feel like answering for all of it. We go by what I directly see. Okay, in the first column. Talent pools reduce dependency on agencies. I would say true and false. Honestly, I would say false, for a reason being it can be a very symbiotic relationship. That's what going to happen in the future. But from the shoes of immediate, staffing agencies on a very short-term basis, people might think it is true. Actually, it is not. If the talent pool word is, pre-coined with curated talent pool, you having a very, let's say, from US Tech perspective, and you're aware of the database that we have, humongous. And we always wanted to segment the database that we have it by industry, by, let's say, women back to work, by veterans. You have your own segmentization. Keep it ready to hire. In that means it is again applicable. The end customer can leverage, and it will be very, mutual a relationship. So I would say not for the future. It might look yes for now.
Colin, have you got one on the list?
I do. And it's actually the first one. Direct sourcing costs less than indirect sourcing. And I've done supply chain and talent acquisition and all the rest of it. And I've actually got a stat on this that was done with a client, and it was only true direct sourcing 60% of the time.
Right.
And that's why everyone believes it's this kind of persona that it's cheaper. But if you consider all the reality, and I've worked in the recruitment industry a long time. There's a reason why recruitment companies exist. There's a talent pool they have. There's a network. They do a fantastic job. At the end of the day, there's a reason why you pay that fee. And there's a lot of hidden costs in direct sourcing that people don't, if it's not done correctly or well. And also, just if you take certain industries, there's a talent pool they have you don't have. There's people in their network you don't have. So 60% of the time is the stats that I've seen on it.
Jolly good. It'll be interesting. It'd be great for you guys to respond to all of these and just put your comments on. We're not going to have time today, but let me just jump through to the next question. The implications of moving from the transactional approach to the employer brand approach. Obviously, there's lots of stakeholders, Kalpesh, involved in this. If you would actually say, who's going to start this? How does this start? Is it a demand-led or is it a supplier-led initiative?
I think it goes back here into the objective of the organisation, right? Because nobody starts off with we must build a talent pool for the future, right? Unless it's a very forward-thinking organisation that's going through disruption and going through a whole bunch of change. So I think it's actually every single one of those individuals are probably responsible in some way, shape, or form for nudging the
Yeah.
future of how we go about dealing with this. But if you had to, if you needed someone who had the ultimate vote,
Yeah.
if it's a business leader that goes, okay, my business is going to be disrupted, we're going to need a talent pool, we're going to move locations, our business strategy is changing, we're moving from analog to digital to Netflix, etc., broadcast, etc. The business leader will know where the organization is moving to, but they have to work with the HR leader to make sure the talent strategy is right on two fronts, not just about how you go and hire people in, but how are you going to reskill and energize your existing workforce. And my advice to most companies, which is quite ironic for me being a recruiter, and I've always been paid on find the people, get a fee, right? But I typically, and even up until this morning, I was having this conversation with someone. I was like, who in your organization have you got that can do this job? If you gave them, that's either job ready, or if you gave them some support. So my advice to organizations is, talent pool is great, but think about who you can upskill, reskill, right skill, downskill, whatever language you want to use, to be able to do potential future roles.
Good to know. And just moving on to the next question, back to data, Chris, on the subject of the transition that's happening, do you think data itself is going to help organizations to accelerate this change? Because
data is going to help organizations, period. I could have stopped you in the middle of your question there and said, yes, it's going to help. And I think that there's times right now where companies just really don't have good data. The HR folks, they really are people, right? They want to engage with hiring managers. They want to engage with staffing suppliers and candidates and put the people in the seats to get the jobs done. And that's where they feel passionate about, right?
Yeah.
Along the lines, that entire process, there's a heck of a lot of data that you could be capturing. And some companies are capturing it, some are not. Some of that data is quantitative and some of it is qualitative. So just, the two questions I like to ask folks are, what decisions are you making today that are not based upon data? And what decisions can you not make because you don't have the data, right? So just consider, listen, anytime I'm going to make a business decision, I better have some kind of data to justify the decision that I made. And that could be anecdotal, and that's fine, but at least it's something. It's not just whim and gut feel and, well, I thought it would be a good idea if. Back it up with something, and if you don't right now have those data structures in place and the processes in place to foster that decision-making process, today is the great day to start that kind of structuring.
Good to know. I'm going to just quickly, Kalpesh, before you jump onto that, I'm just going to jump through these next couple of slides simply for the fact that I do want to make sure that we stay on time on the schedule. And in terms of the key takeaways, just so that everybody knows, we are putting together on the page for this event, the webinar recording from today. We're also putting together an infographic on the business impact of inverting the hiring pyramid that you can download from there. That's freely available. Also a checklist onto critical success factors that I've just literally jumped over, because I do want to make sure that we jump onto the questions very quickly before we finish. And one of the questions that has come up, Deepika, I'm going to put it straight back to you, is the subject of return on investment, which is, I think, it's a really difficult one always to answer on these things. But from what you've seen so far with US Tech Solutions Group, is there an ROI? Can we get to a number?
So, Ian, that's a very interesting question, from a very business-centric question coming from, an employer. Good. So honestly, if I have to answer it, we can go to the very industry adoption slide where we spoke about the success stories in a very generic terms, right from Deloitte to McKinsey to Gartner's of the world adopting it. We spoke about 33% cost savings and 50% time saving and all of that, which is proven industry success stories. From ROI, in my terminology, there are two aspects to it. Number one, tangible. Number two, intangible. Tangible being directly proportional to the cost savings, for sure, yes. Once the adoption is through, it might take a year or two. Once we're completely having an integrated ecosystem, you will definitely get to see a beneficial run on, you know, the costing side. Intangible is a lot. We have been talking about it from the beginning. All of that adds to the ROI. And I personally feel intangible are the ones which makes your life easier and makes your customer happier at all the levels, while cost is the driving motive, be it the efficiencies to, you know, high quality data, to faster time to hire, and all of that counts. From US Tech perspective, yes, we indeed started implementing it with our customer spaces directly. We are yet to witness, but we could already see the roadmap coming up. There is always a pitch around it. Yeah.
Yeah, good. So for the attendees of this session, if you want to ask another question, now is the time. So do get your questions in. But Kalpesh, before we jump into the answering of those questions, I've got another one for you anyway, which is, does this benefit every company? And if it does, is it realistic to do it internally, to do it yourself?
So it could benefit every company. The dependency is going to be on the maturity of the organization, what stage you're at, and what diverse skills you're hiring. If you're, a company that needs on-demand staff, talent pooling happens naturally, and there's enough products you can use to come through. If you're in an industry that's actually pretty safe and regular and you don't have to hire that often, probably not. Because part of the thing about talent pooling, taking Colin's point, is it can be quite expensive if you do it, to carry it going through. So if you're only going to make 10 hires a year, probably not. My advice is go and pay an agency, right? Or make sure you've got a good referral scheme with your staff. The one thing I just wanted to go back to Chris's point, and it was an event you ran, Ian, going back a couple of months ago, and it's the point on data, right? HR people get confused with data, and it's not because they don't understand it. It's because you either have lots of data or you don't have enough data. So I think, taking Chris's point of view, data is critical to make that decision about your talent pooling and what you do as your strategy. But what is even more important is having the right data to make the right decisions.
Yeah. And Chris, on that point, I think you are working with a partner company, aren't you, that actually brings the data forward, those KPIs together faster now. Is that right? Could you just explain that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of HR software out there, whether it's a VMS, an ATS, an HRIS, that does a fantastic job of consolidating and transacting business and getting all those operational data points that underlie, let's say, a massive row and column data extract. And that's great. And they say, okay, we can extract all this data and then we can do what with it? If we don't have somebody that is really a strong data analyst or a business intelligence developer, you're not going to be able to make a heck of a lot of good decisions. And so therefore what we're doing is we're saying, listen, we already have pre-built analytics, KPIs, insight engine in place that can take the data from those systems, analyze the raw data, map it to something that is meaningful for HR professionals to help them make better decisions around cost, quality, speed of delivery, things of that nature. And so, yeah, that's really what we specialize in here with Rad Consultants. So, Ian, I appreciate you. Let me explain that a little bit.
Yeah, no worries. And I think that one of them is actually a Power BI platform, isn't it, for KPIs? Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So it's really looking at, okay, in terms of program financials, how much are we spending on non-employee talent? How quickly are our suppliers providing candidates and resumes and submittals and CVs? And what percentage, all the different ratios that exist within that operation, fills to opportunities, resumes to opportunities, different things of that nature, that we can say, okay, this is how our our suppliers are performing. These are the hiring managers that are interviewing candidates, maybe those that are not, maybe they have a lower bill rate, and seeing what alignment there is and what correlation there is between all these different dependent and independent variables. So instead of folks saying, all right, let me extract that and build that from scratch, that's where we've already done all the work for them.
Understood. We're running out of time. We're up to the last minute. So I'm just going to go quickly around the panel for last comments. And so I'm just going to ask each of you really, the big piece of advice that you would give to a type of stakeholder in this space, and what advice would you give them on the subject of inverting the hiring pyramid? Kalpesh, who would you target in your conversation in terms of the stakeholder, and what would you be saying to them about what to do next?
So I would say I'd go to the CHRO, CPO and say, go and talk to your CEO and go and find out what the business strategy is and what is coming down the pipe in terms of requirements on existing talent and new talent, to be able to deliver on the organisational goals and objectives.
Jolly good. And we know that 27% of digital transformation strategies are going wrong because there isn't a link between the business strategy and HR strategy. Is that similar, do you think, in this space?
I think 100%. I think, and again, going back to just quoting BCG from yesterday, one of the biggest challenges we've got around AI, it's here. It's not coming. It is here, and companies need to have a strategy today of how to upskill individuals about how to use AI to impact their jobs. We talked about Klarna beforehand, Ian, about 700 headcount has been impacted by actually using AI. And those people they've gone from the organisation, but it's not to say that they can't replace that headcount in mission critical jobs.
Yeah, I've just got Saransh has just put a couple of questions. I'm trying to see if I squeeze them in before we get to the hour. So Colin, coming to you on this one. What would talent pool be helpful in Invert? If you already had a talent pool as a staffing agency, let's say, yep. Is there an opportunity here for you to jump in with both feet on this and actually say, hey, let's go and serve all the direct sourcing platforms?
In terms of, sorry, say that question again for me, just to process it properly.
If you've already got a talent pool in a specific niche, is there an opportunity here in this new business model for you to kind of jump in?
For you to jump in what way?
Sorry. As in to become a provider of that curated talent pool to more people that want to be doing this?
Yeah, you're then acting as a recruitment agency, if you like. Yes, you can. I would say, if you can't do what you do well enough, why would you go and do it somewhere else, though? Would be my thing with that openly. But I would also go back to, unrelated to that question, something Kalpesh mentioned about pools and stuff like that earlier and going after the HR suite. If you were going to talk about recruitment and going after talent pooling, I would swap that question around and say, instead of focus in-house and if you're struggling with your HR or your C-suite to understand the benefit of the inverted pyramid, why doesn't a recruitment business enable their clients to use that inverted pyramid to support their CHRO and C-suite to utilize their external agency doing it on their behalf? I would say that would probably be the better strategy rather than trying to be a recruitment agency from an internal perspective. They do exist, or any other kind of means. Do it well and enable the best way to get it done, whether that's external or internal.
Back to my original question to the panel, which is, which stakeholder would you want to talk to, and what would your advice be?
Similar to Kalpesh, to be honest. It is the C-suite. It is HR, if they can be at that level and understand. And openly, and something not to pitch Red Wizard, but one thing I think is really important is he's putting all the different heads together, because we go back to the technology, and data is just so business critical. And I've got a last comment on data in a second, but if you can bring the technology department that doesn't get involved in the VMSs and the ATSs very often, bring your procurement function, bring your people function, wherever your governance sits, and bring them in a room together to get them all talking to each other and understanding, you've got hope of a really good sort of situation there. And I think that's important. The only thing I would also say, and whether you're an MSP supplying a client or in-house, if you've got the data to understand, let's say it's a 100 million program where it is today, you've probably got the data to work out how you can save 1%, which probably is £1 million saving. So with that money, try the inverted comma, pyramid. With that saving you've done, data will help you understand where you can save money in a business, which is really important.
Great, thanks, Colin. Chris, who would you talk to, and what would you say to them?
Well, I think that if you can get to the C level, of course, that's fantastic. There's going to be a lot of times where you have a contact that is just not the CHRO. And that doesn't mean that's not a good person to talk to. But the only issue there is, if you want to get in the door, you need to make sure it's an open and shut case. If they're going to take it up the ladder a bit, give them the very clear case studies, as we've talked about, give them very clear value proposition, return on investment information. So yeah, you want to get it up the chain, but you use the resources that you have at your disposal, whether that's human beings here in this situation, relationships, to see if you can help that company out.
Great stuff. And Thipika, I think it's probably only right that I come back to US Tech, as you guys originated the term, and just say, again, for you, stakeholder, who would you speak to and what would you say to them?
I think most of the advice are already rolled out to the C-suite executives. So I think my essence of 2 cents will stay with the mid-level hiring managers and the actual recruiting team, Ian. So while we all are happy to do the adoption on the name of technology after ROI, I think it is very important not to forget the employer value proposition. Keep it authentic hiring. Please remember to engage and establish nurture relationship. That is long way ahead. So it's just not adoption, but you have to keep the ball rolling and working. That's to do with the human enablement. Yeah, I think there it ends.